Hey y'all, it's Red, your favorite non-binary creative life coach. I'm back at it again with Brené Brown's Daring Greatly. We finally made it to chapter 3, Understanding and Combating Shame. This chapter is very long, so I am breaking it down into several parts. So what I'm going to do is basically I chose a few quotes that I highlighted, and I'm going to talk about them as I go through instead of really just talking about it at the end. So just so you know, this first part talks a lot about Harry Potter. My fellow LGBT people know all about J.K. Rowling being a TERF. At the same time, the quotes that are used or the parts that are referenced in this chapter are, however, very similar to things that coaches say and what we teach. So I hope that you can at least allow some of the messages to be heard, whether you take them or not as your own, and not necessarily, you don't have to say that, oh, this is J.K. Rowling, aka it is bad. Because, she wrote a lot of words. And so if we canceled every single word she said, that would also be problematic. So we're just going to take what works and throw the rest in the trash. You know what I'm saying? If you want to. I'm not saying that Harry Potter is not great for a lot of people. That's a whole other story. It's very supportive for lots of people. Lots of people love it. I understand. I do too, /did. But that's not the point of this video. Okay. So, this first part of this chapter is called Vulnerability and Shame in One Book. Are you trying to kill us, or Defense Against the Dark Arts? And again, I call this a seminar. And if you want to join the seminar, you can make a comment below about the parts that are relevant to this video. Okay, thank you. Okay, so basically she starts this chapter off where she's talking about where she met a man who comes up and he's like, oh, I thought you were going to be like scary because you talk about vulnerability and shame. And he was like, oh, I thought you'd be like Snape or whatever. And she's like, oh, I love Snape, but no. And then they talk about this quote that she says in one of her presentations. She says, only when we're brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. And I liked how how she adjusted it for her own needs, because there's a thing that Dumbledore says. We all know something similar to the quote about how he says, there's hope if only we remember to turn on the light, something like that. And within this conversation, and after watching Brené Brown's presentation, the man had said that he noticed that we use way too much damn energy trying to avoid hard topics when they're really the only ones that can set us free. Like acknowledging the shame and moving through vulnerability are the only things that can set us free. So then we move on and we say, well, Brené says, no credit here. Brené says, besides, the world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. We've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the part we choose to act on. That's who we really are. I do want to say with acknowledgement to like TERFs and like homophobes and those guys. They could use, it came up in my brain that they could use this quote in a conversation to try to justify their own points. I'm just going to say blanket statement. It doesn't apply to gender or sexuality. So if anybody's just like, oh, being gay is a choice or being trans is a choice, just that is another opinion, thought you can throw in the trash. this person, if we remember the man in the arena quote, this person is not in the arena with you. They are throwing spears from very high up, far away in the bleachers. Okay. So, and then also, the next quote is, but if we don't come to terms with our shame, our struggles, we start believing that there's something wrong with us, that we're bad, flawed, not good enough, and even worse, we start acting on those beliefs. I want to turn this around to thinking about being a writer, because, gay stuff, writing stuff, they are not necessarily connected, but I do them both. So I want to think about what kind of beliefs do your characters have, whether it's about the world, how they interact with it, or themselves, and which do they act on, which do they struggle with. That I feel like that makes a character very interesting, and it's clear why Harry Potter was so popular, because he has, there are so many stories that you can tell, man against God, man against nature, man against self, man against other people, man, whatever, a person. And that's one of the many reasons why it was so enticing, is because he fought himself, he fought evil within himself, or he fought what he thought was evil within himself. And there are other books that you do this with, but Harry Potter is just on my mind right now, so that's just what's coming out. So it can be very problematic when we start acting on our less than helpful beliefs. While I will acknowledge that often good intent is very important, you still have to follow through on the things that you stand for. You know what I'm saying? Or else you're just gonna not come across as authentic. If you're just talking about like, oh, I love peace, and then you go home and you're like screaming at everybody, like, not helpful. So that is obviously coming from a deeper place of some sort of belief about self in different environments. So that's a place to think about. Okay, moving on to the next quote is basically about how there are allegories and stories, and Harry Potter touches on many allegories about struggling between light and dark, hero's journey, why vulnerability and love are true marks of courage. And again, when we're talking about writing, I think it's really always very interesting to see how people use allegories and archetypes in their work, and to see how they change it for their own needs and their own messages that they're trying to send. So I'd like you to think about what kind of messages you're sending in your writing, whether it's a poem or a novel or rap. What message are you sending? What images, what familiar images and what familiar stories are you telling to get across those messages? What can people recognize? What can people attach to, right? There's always more. Moving on to this part about attaching self-worth to how other people receive your work. Yeah, she talks about, writing and creative work specifically because, she's a writer, she's a presenter. So it's problematic to attach your worth to if somebody says like, oh, your piece is great, or your piece is trash, because even depending on who is saying it, you might believe it or not, right? Like if your sibling, if you get along and they're just like, oh, this is great, you might still have disbelief and be like, no, it's trash. Or if somebody else says, oh, it's trash, they might be, that person who did the creation, who shared, might be like, oh, that means I am trash, and every single piece of work that I am going to do in the future is also trash. So yeah, Brené talks about two things happen when you attach this worthiness to your creation, how it's received. Number one, you might not end up actually sharing the deepest, most connective layers of your work. Some that are, scary, right? So it'll be more shallow, right? It might be more shallow, maybe. Not every time, it might be more shallow. And there might be less for a reader to connect to. And then also number two is that, again, you might get crushed and you'll never share again, or you'll take forever again to rebuild your courage. And then this is just a cycle of crap. Yeah, it's not good. The quote, with an awareness of shame and strong shame resilience skills, this scenario is completely different. You know that you are far more than a painting, an innovative idea, an effective pitch, a good sermon, or a high ranking. So I just furthered this thought with, you are more than the work that you share, the work that you make. You're your heart, spirit, and soul, right? You're your conversations that you have with other people. You're your interactions. You're not just this one thing. So why would you attach your full worth and start spiraling into oh, I hate myself, I'm a terrible person, I'm bad at creating, if it's literally just this one facet? Sure, if it's very important to you, I get it. But if it's very important to you, it's even more important to notice and acknowledge that it takes time to get better at things. If it's important to you, you already know that it takes practice, right? So this mindset of knowing that allows you to try over and over and not quit so fast. A bunch of authors weren't published until after they submitted and were rejected for their work for a long time. J.K. Rowling herself, again, J.K. Rowling, you know what I mean. If you share more, you're seen more. But remember past videos about narcissism and also oversharing in certain places. Keep that in mind, that you're sharing with people who have earned this right, and that you're not just oversharing to make some shock value, right? Okay, then there's this quote from Peter Sheehan? He's an author, speaker, and CEO, and he says that the secret killer of innovation is shame. That deep fear we all have of being wrong, of being belittled, and feeling less than is what stops us taking the very risks required to move our companies forward. And I know it seems like whiplash, so I'm going from talking about you to a company, but it's all there. It's all relevant. Then he talks about how the leader needs to admit that they don't know everything, right? And allow other people on the team to share what they know. And so then I just kind of added on to this thought of if you only have one person calling all the shots, you're going to get real siloed into the same ideas over and over. And yes, consistency is important within company, business, marketing, but those are just supposed to be the bones. That's not supposed to dictate everything you do has to be exactly the same. Otherwise, how do you know what's going to work better? And that's the whole point. So I continue to say, to dare greatly, the title of the book, you have to connect to your sense of self-worth. It's sort of a circle. Self-worth leads to daring greatly, leads to some more self-worth. And it's hard at first, but you gotta start somewhere. You gotta. If you, for example, think that you're a terrible writer, but you want to write, and then you share and get constructive feedback, then you alter your piece due to the feedback if you vibe with it, and then you share it. There's more constructive feedback, both positive and I don't want to say negative, because it's not, if you're in a good place and people aren't just like saying that shitting on your piece is what is constructive criticism. If they're giving you good constructive criticism, then it's not negative. It's just something to work on. Then that gives you more confidence, and you can decrease your attachment to perfectionism from the beginning, because that can be dangerous too. That can just stop you before you even write a word. Okay, so depersonalize the shame, detach from it, externalize it rather than internalizing it. The shame isn't you. It's probably something that you heard, or a version of what you heard somebody say to you or somebody say to somebody else as you were growing up, whether it's the media, your parents, your pastor, whoever. A message that you just received, for better or for worse, right? Then Brené has this nice quote about her writing process and her little like gremlins in her ears. She says that one says that my writing sucks and no one will care about these topics. Another tells me that I'm going to get criticized and I'll deserve it. And the big one keeps saying, real writers don't struggle like this. Real writers don't dangle their modifiers. And I'm over here like, bro, I've been writing since 6th grade. I've been writing for a while. And not only on my own either, in like specific writing classes and workshops and leading, right? And tutoring. I don't know what a modifier is. Like, is that bad? Okay, maybe a little bit, but honestly, I'm just gonna take this to say, like, that's not my job actually necessarily to know what a modifier is, like, from the top. Because as like a creative life coach and, you know, writing from my writing tutor background, I am more here for, while I know some of those things that make writing like bump up a little bit in the like the quality, you know what I'm saying? I'm mostly here to support folks and get them to have the courage to actually do the thing that will make them happy, right? And just have the confidence to start at all, or keep working on it at all, or figure out the next step. That's my favorite thing, is figuring out the next steps and figuring out what they feel is absolutely doable for themselves, that they will do that next step. Okay, that's that's my sermon on my job. Talk to me about writing, please. It's my favorite thing. Yeah, you don't have to know all of every single tiny in and out about anything creative to start. Like, there are thousands of videos on like anything on YouTube or purchasable or masterclass. But if you just take in all that stuff and you do that for hours and you produce zero, I'm not saying you're at the same place as when you started, but you're not going anywhere with a piece. It doesn't exist anywhere except maybe in your mind. So you got to do the thing. You got to be vulnerable with yourself too before you even are vulnerable with anybody else. Okay. Yeah. Literally, the next quote is, sometimes when we dare to walk into the arena, the greatest critic we face is ourselves. How great is this book written that when I start ranting about it, the next quote is literally what I'm ranting about. So then her next quote is, if we speak about our shame with folks who have earned it, like a therapist, someone you're very close to, a responsive community, the shame can begin to wither, and language and story bring light to shame and destroy it. So shame, my next thoughts are that shame thinks that your shortcomings are proof of unworthiness, but they're not. We all have things to learn and things that we're good at. we've practiced shame all of our lives, and so it makes sense that it's very strong and convincing. But just like learning a new language, you need to practice shame resilience. And this is very relevant for me right now because just a couple days ago, I started trying to learn Korean. I don't know by the time that this video comes out if I'll still be doing that, but it's hard. I feel like an infant. So, like, shame is gonna bring some stuff up, and working on the shame, like, even if you're talking with like a professional, like a coach or a therapist, you're gonna feel like an infant, and that might bring some stuff up. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, it's gonna bring some stuff up, and that is the end of this section. So I hope that you enjoyed. If you have anything to say that is relevant to what I'm saying, rather than just, why did you talk about J.K. Rowling at all? This video is not getting her any money. Okay, so it's fine. We understand the messages. Writers, I'd like you to think about what your character's shames are and what is maybe not necessarily aligned and what they're struggling with and how you can represent that and how that dictates their actions. I just think that's great. Connective allegories, archetypes, hero's journey, it's all good. Yes, if you enjoyed this, leave a comment below. If you wanted to hear more about LGBT experience and or writing and or poetry, please subscribe. I'd love to see you around, and I hope that you all have a great day.